It begins in silence. No newspaper headline, no police report, no obituary. Just a shack in the woods, swallowed by time, deep in the hollows of Appalachia, where roads forget to exist and names decay into whispers. Two brothers sat across from each other, their faces frozen in a look that's hard to describe. Not hatred, not love, something older, like memory, warped by blood. They were born into a house that had no mirrors, not because they couldn't afford them, because their mother refused to let them see what they were. She said the reflection would lie, that the devil lived in the glass and watched them grow. So they grew up blind to themselves, but not to the world around them, and the world, when it caught glimpses of them, turned its eyes away. This isn't a story about monsters, it's a story about what happens when history forgets a family, when poverty, isolation, and silence breed generation after generation of children who carry the same name, the same face, the same curse. These brothers weren't born evil. They were born into a loop, a family line that curled in on itself until it suffocated. Locals remember the way they moved through town, heads down, feet dragging like their bones didn't know how to align. Their speech was slurred, but not from drink. Some said it was like listening to a dying dialect. Others said it was the sound of chromosomes folding in half. But even in their brokenness, there was something ancient about them, like relics from a time we weren't meant to remember. The records don't help much. The census stopped counting them after 1946. No birth certificates, no medical charts. Only the whispers of midwives and the rumors carried by old men on bar stools. That their mother was also their cousin, that their father was never named, that the family tree was more like a circle carved in ash. And yet, they lived, year after year, haunting that same patch of rotting land, watching each other, talking to no one, and slowly becoming something unrecognizable, not just to others, but to themselves. They were brothers, they were a secret, and they were a warning. They say a curse doesn't start with lightning, it starts with forgetting, one missed detail, one forbidden choice, and then a family spends the rest of its days burying the truth under rituals they no longer understand. That's how it began with the Rawlins brothers. The name Rawlins doesn't appear in any official record before 1892. Before that, they were simply known as those ones, the family up the ridge, behind the dead church, past the creek that never ran clean. The community knew not to go near them, but no one could remember why. By the time someone finally did, it was too late. Their great-grandfather, Eli Rawlins, was a Civil War deserter who vanished into the hills with a girl from his own bloodline. Her name was never spoken again. They built a cabin where no birds sang, and there, without guidance, without faith, without outsiders, the Rawlins family began folding inward, each generation marrying closer, uncles to nieces, first cousins, even siblings, not out of cruelty, but because the outside world had long since sealed them off. By the time the two brothers were born, Levi and Micah Rawlins, the blood had thickened into something that no longer worked the way it should. Their eyes were cloudy from the start. Levi's spine curved before he could walk. Micah never spoke a full sentence in his life. And yet, they lived. Not just survived, but endured. Like weeds through concrete. They knew how to fish with their hands, how to hunt with wire, how to bury without a sound. But as they grew older, their behaviors began to change. The forest wasn't just a home anymore, it was a boundary, one they dared not cross. They developed rituals, walking the perimeter 3 times before sundown, carving symbols into trees, speaking in murmured syllables no one else could understand. Was it a language, or just the echo of a mind unraveling? Neighbors sometime caught sight of them, always together, always watching. One report from the 1970s describes a woman hiking too far off trail, swearing she saw 2 men standing naked in the river, motionless, staring at her. She turned and ran. When she told the sheriff, he just shook his head and said, "Don't go near the Rawlins land, it remembers." So what exactly did it remember? Whatever it was still alive. In them. Some say the Rawlins brothers weren't entirely human, not in the way we understand it. They moved with the kind of stillness that made animals go quiet. You didn't hear them approach. You felt them, like a shift in the air pressure, like a presence that had no weight but filled the space behind your spine. And yet they were born the way any child is born, through a woman in pain, in blood and breath, crying into the void of an empty room. Their mother, if you can call her that, was said to be 16 when Levi was born, and barely 17 when Micah followed. The man who fathered them never appeared in public again. Some said he was her cousin, others, her brother. In a community where no one asked questions, answers still had a way of rotting the soul. Their mother didn't raise them with lullabies or toys. She raised them with silence, with the knowledge that the world beyond the tree line was not for them. She taught them to fear it, to distrust it, but more importantly, to keep the family line alive, no matter the cost. That was the commandment, the only law they lived by. Keep the blood close, never let it mix. It's hard to say what effect this had on their minds. Doctors never visited, teachers never came, but by the time the brothers were teenagers, their sense of reality had begun to fracture. They believed the house could hear them, that the land would punish them if they spoke the wrong name. Micah once went 3 weeks without eating, punishing himself for stepping on a bird's nest. Levi would spend hours staring into broken mirrors, whispering names that no longer belonged to anyone alive. But even more disturbing was how synchronized they were. They moved in perfect unison, finished each other's thoughts. When they bothered to speak at all, locals called them the twins, even though they weren't. They just shared something deeper than genetics. A soul, or a wound. In their 20s, they stopped entering town altogether. The Rawlins cabin began to decay, windows broken, roof sagging, but never abandoned. You'd see smoke from the chimney now and then, faint, flickering, like a ghost exhaling. And then, the animals began to disappear. It began with dogs, then goats, then calves, too young to defend themselves, all gone without a trace. No blood, no tracks, just silence where there used to be life. Farmers blamed coyotes, but the bodies were never found, and the forest was too quiet, as if the predators were just as afraid of what had moved in. Some whispered that the Rawlins brothers were behind it, that they were taking animals not out of hunger, but for something older, something ritualistic. One old man claimed he saw them dragging a deer carcass into a hollow stump under moonlight, chanting in broken tones. When asked what they were saying, he just shook his head and muttered, "It wasn't words. It was older than words." No one ever investigated, not seriously. The sheriff didn't cross the ridge anymore. The church stopped visiting families past the creek. The Rawlins land had become a place of unspoken understanding, a geographic ghost mapped by fear instead of roads. Everyone agreed, leave them alone, and they'll stay in the dark. But darkness doesn't stay still. It spreads. By the 1980s, strange markings began to appear on neighboring properties. Carvings in barn doors, circles of ash left on porches, crops wilting overnight. One family found their chicken coop burned to the ground, with every bird gone but no signs of fire beyond the fence. They moved out the next morning. But the Rawlins brothers never spoke, never confessed, and so the stories grew teeth. Teenagers dared each other to approach the cabin, usually at night. Most never made it past the tree line, but one boy, Kyle Brennan, didn't come back at all. Search dogs traced his scent to the edge of the Rawlins property, then stopped, refused to take another step, as if they knew what waited there. 3 days later, Kyle's backpack was found hanging from a tree, unzipped, empty. Inside was a photo of him and his sister, nothing else. And yet, no one was arrested, no charges, no warrants. Because deep down people believed the Rawlins weren't criminals. They were something worse, something law couldn't touch. You don't arrest a curse, you don't handcuff a wound passed down through blood, you bury it, You pray it doesn't spread. Time became a suggestion for the Rawlins brothers. The seasons changed, the forest aged, but they stayed the same. Gaunt, silent, watching. Some say they no longer ate food like the rest of us, that they lived off something else, memory maybe, regret, or the echo of sins no one remembered committing. By the 1990s, the cabin was barely standing. The porch sagged like it was tired of holding secrets. Windows were blacked out, the chimney crumbled, and yet the smoke kept rising. Locals said they hadn't seen the brothers in over a decade, but they knew they were still in there. You could feel it, a weight in your chest when you passed too close, a coldness that wasn't weather. Then, out of nowhere, they appeared. Levi was seen wandering the edge of a gas station parking lot at dusk, barefoot, shirtless, mumbles tumbling from his lips like dead leaves. He wasn't begging. He wasn't lost. He was just there, existing like a shadow in the corner of your vision. When someone tried to speak to him, he just pointed to the tree line and said, "It's waking up again." Then he walked back into the woods and was never seen in town again. That same year, hunters claimed to hear screaming in the valley, not animal, not quite human, like a language forgotten by God. People stopped camping in that region. Even experienced hikers refused to pass through Rawlins territory. They said the paths changed, that maps didn't match anymore, that the land had turned in on itself, like the family who cursed it. And still, no one intervened. The government never came, no case files, no investigations, because to do that you'd have to acknowledge something the nation itself has always tried to deny, that there are places in America where time collapsed, where bloodlines rotted in silence, where humanity blinked and something else slipped in. If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if this was your bloodline? If the curse ran in your veins, would you hide, or would you face it? Because the Rawlins brothers didn't choose this, but they embraced it, not with joy, with duty. There was no funeral when Levi died, no grave marker, no obituary in the paper, just a rumor that drifted through the hollow one fall morning. One of the Rawlins boys is gone. No one knew how, no one dared ask, and no one offered condolences, because by then the Rawlins weren't seen as people anymore. They were legends, ghosts that breathed. Micah didn't leave the cabin after that, not even to fetch water. Neighbors said the smoke from the chimney stopped, the birds stopped flying near it. A mail carrier, lost on a back route, claimed he saw a figure sitting in the window for 3 days straight, unmoving, staring. He never went back. There was something tragic about Micah, more than Levi. Levi had the edge of violence, the smell of fear on him, but Micah was hollow. Like someone who knew the story he was in and had no idea how to end it. People started seeing carvings appear along the path to the cabin, not symbols, faces, crude childlike sketches of 2 boys, hand in hand, eyes wide with sorrow. One always crossed out, the other slowly fading. Micah lived another 6 years after his brother, in silence, in rot. No one's sure when he died. Only that one spring, the smoke stopped for good. The chimney collapsed, and the forest began to grow over the house like it was swallowing it back into the dirt, reclaiming what was never supposed to stand in the first place. Eventually, the county sent a crew to clear the land, not to investigate, just to erase it. A controlled burn was planned, but the fire didn't catch. The wood was too wet, they said, or maybe the land refused. To this day, the Rawlins cabin remains, blackened, broken, but standing. Trees have grown through parts of it. Animals avoid it. GPS glitches when you get close. Some say Micah's still there, sitting in that chair by the window watching the trees, not because he's alive, but because the house won't let him go, because sometimes a bloodline doesn't end with death. Sometimes it lingers, waits, whispers, and sometimes it wants to be remembered. You might think this is where it ends. 2 brothers, consumed by the sins of their ancestors, buried in unmarked soil beneath a collapsing roof. But the story doesn't end there, because curses don't die, they migrate. A young couple bought land near the old Rawlins property in 2011. They weren't from the area. Outsiders, looking for a quiet place to raise a family off-grid. The real estate agent never mentioned the name. No one warned them, because no one wanted to say it out loud. Within 3 months, they moved out. They didn't give a reason, left most of their belongings behind. Neighbors said the woman wouldn't speak, just sat in the truck with a blanket over her head. The man kept repeating one sentence. There was someone in the walls. Later, a game warden passing through the area claimed he saw something in the trees near the Rawlins ruins. Not an animal, not a person, a figure, tall, still, watching. When he moved toward it, it vanished, left no prints. Just a wet imprint on the soil where nothing had stood for hours. Researchers tried to investigate the area. Anthropologists, folklorists. One of them found carvings beneath the cabin floor, dozens of them. Phrases in Appalachian dialects, but distorted, fragmented. The only full sentence they could translate read, "We kept it close, but it kept us closer." And that's the truth, isn't it? Some families carry a legacy of wealth, others of greatness, but a few carry something else, something darker, invisible to the eye but stamped deep into the marrow of their bones, a shape in their reflection, a wrongness in their blood. The Rawlins brothers weren't monsters, they were mirrors, held up to the parts of our country we'd rather not see, the broken lines, the forgotten hills, the generational wounds wrapped in silence. And somewhere, right now, in another forgotten valley, someone just like them is being born with the same eyes, the same silence, and the same curse. Because America has many secrets, but blood remembers, always.